Could you not be experiencing reality the way you want to because you don't have the neurons connecting and synapting the way that they should be for the reality that you're looking to experience? If you're interested in learning more about this and finding out how you can actually get your neurons to synapse in the way that you want to experience the simulation the way you would like to experience them, then keep on watching. Welcome, everyone, to the simulation frequency. On tonight's episode, we're going to be visiting neurogenesis. This topic specifically is so interesting to me because I do personally believe we can regrow our neurons, we can strengthen neural synapses and pathways. But I'm going to go into a few videos discussing this so you just don't have to take my word for it, like Lamar Burton used to say. The other thing here, too, is I have been using these things myself. I'm not just telling you this for fun. I am extremely blessed to be able to come on here and provide this information to you free, that whoever stumbles upon this video realizes that all of the gold nuggets we're about to go through, that you can enable these things in your own neurology and start living your very best life, because these are the goals of my videos, and also to proving that we're living in a simulation. I think all the things that I discuss on this channel prove that we are living in some sort of simulated environment, but I do believe it all comes back from the Godhead, which would be one consciousness. Envision one big consciousness outside of the simulation, and we have our avatars that streams in that consciousness. And the brains are just an avenue to stream the consciousness for experience, just like every other living creature has its own rendition or programming that is ran here in the simulation. And I believe that it is true for the avatar too. It is all for God's experience, I think. You can believe whatever you want to believe. This channel is not here to convince you of my beliefs. And I am very open to it not being a simulation, folks. If it is not, I am totally okay with that. I do truly believe that it all comes from the mind, that it is all a holographic projection, that we actually never truly die, so to speak. I believe in the whole concept of quantum immortality. So everything that we're going to talk about here points back to everything that I had just mentioned regarding my beliefs. This probably strengthens the connections in my neural pathways to make me see the simulation the way I want to see it. And that's why I challenge you to all be on the weirder side of life sometimes, so you get to experience those things. Otherwise, I don't personally believe if you focus on these things and build the brain, so to speak, in a way for that experience, you may not have it. You may not even know to have it. You won't be focused on it. You won't be training your reticular activating system. You won't be getting into certain brain states with those certain thoughts, frequencies, actions, etc., etc. Let's talk about how we can actually shift in the simulation, because I also am somebody who believes that this is a infinity world situation, multiverse situation, where you are alive in every universe as a different potentiality. We are basically all one big superposition, so to speak. We are different nodes of consciousness ready to collapse into the next experience. And it's the way that we think or focus consistently on something that will render that next thing. And is this always true exactly for every situation? No. But then again, we don't really know. If you're somebody who believes in free will, we may or may not have this. If you research this area deeply, you will find that our brain is reacting sooner than we can consciously understand that it is. And this does point back to the fact that we have conscious thinking, obviously, and then we have the subconscious, where it does control all of our automatic processes. And some people believe it controls a lot of things. Mostly everything could be said is controlled by the subconscious. I'm not really sure how I feel. I don't know if there's like an 80-20 ratio or something of this nature, but we are ran a lot by our subconscious programming, which, if you think about it, is the way that we have shaped our brains. And there's all different kinds of studies that show that people's brains don't see or witness reality in the same way. We have those different pictures that we can have somebody look at and they see two different things. There's different colors that people observe differently. The fact that you can have so many different potentialities occur in the world, environment, reality, whatever simulation that we live in, whatever you want to call it, universe, to me proves that it is one large game at play. It is waiting for an observer, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a person. The observer can be any other system. Any system observing or interacting with another system can change behavior, which for me allows the game to be played and leaves some things open to chance. There are billions of people, and every single one of those people are experiencing reality differently. So, what we're trying to do here is redirect that for ourselves, because you're going to experience reality the way that you've been directed to, or the way that your reticular activating system has been primed to, the way that your brain is firing and wiring over and over again. And I'm sure if you're into this community or into this information, you'll hear things about affirmations. And all that is the loop. Your brain works in repetition and in loops. And the more you repeat something, that's the whole concept of brainwashing. If you ever listen to any of these different projects that the CIA or the government had, they would often use repetitive tapes saying things that would be usually weird or upsetting, but I think it was to be a fear-based thing, to be able to spike the subconscious into accepting that information and rewiring. We want to do that in a different way, and I'll talk about that too later. We're going to get into Robert Monroe and some frequencies and stuff like this. But in all reality, do you need to do all this funky stuff to be able to shift? Not really. People can do it on the drop of a dime with a simple decision and some action. People don't always have to be doing this other weird side of reality. Some people are completely closed to it. They don't think about it and they go about their business and are very successful out here in the simulation because they have mastered the idea of productivity and focus. And if you have that in your life, and you definitely put that in an area that is lucrative, you will do well most of the time. If you're somebody that is persistent and likes to take challenges, that usually yields good results. So you don't need to believe in any of this stuff at all to wield results. I also do think this could be hereditary to a certain degree. If your mom is super psychic, you might be psychic because perhaps you have built the connections, the neural synapses in your brain to be able to be that more psychic in nature here in the sim. But that's not to say that anybody can't learn those things and build that wiring for themselves. That's what I'm proposing. No matter what you want to do in the sim, you can learn it and you can have your brain fire in that way. And it's kind of like a two-way street, because like once you start doing that, the simulation will start presenting you with opportunities. It will start showing you more and more things. Do I believe that things could come out of thin air? I do kind of believe that. There's no hard and solidified evidence right now that would prove this, but as far as I'm concerned, this is all out of thin air if you think about it. Like, isn't money out of thin air? We just create it out of resources. And like we say, not out of thin air, but what is thin air? It's us on the universe creating the stuff out of the things that we have here that we're creating. So realistically, I don't know, it's kind of all out of thin air. But you guys know what I mean. There's nobody that's been able to just put out their hand to my understanding and be able to materialize something for everybody in the world to witness, like on TV or something of this nature. I did recently find out about the Montauk Project, and there was supposedly a psychic that did this there at that lab, and I'll probably do a video on that at some point investigating that. But that did potentially occur, so they say, but I'm not really sure. But I think that there could be the potentiality for it. If Jesus turned water into wine, if you believe that, is this how he potentially did it? If he walked on water, is this how he potentially did that? If he was able to rise from the dead, is this how he potentially did things of this nature? He was able to shift into these realities where he could just have these things materialize for him immediately or whatever. But I think that it is a learned thing because I don't think, from my understanding, that Jesus was doing these things as like a real child. It is like a built thing. But let's get into some of these videos that I wanted to show you real quick about the neurogenesis and the reticular activating system. There's not a lot of people talking about this on YouTube. The few people I'm going to show you are the only people that I found that were speaking very specifically about this thing called neurogenesis. This individual spoke on the reticular activating system as well, which, there's people out here speaking on this. But to summarize, I'll just let him speak a little bit. I don't want, to get hit with any copyrights or anything. So this is for educational purposes. Shout out to my man, Money Master.
I realized also while I was having this conversation with the universe that I had already known and come across some information in neurology. I had a friend who was doing this program in neurology, and when I heard the students that were taking that program, it just fascinated me. So I pulled one of my friends aside who's doing the program, and I asked him, "What's the coolest thing that you have learned while taking this program?" And he mentioned this part of the brain. This is so many years ago. And only recently have motivational speakers started talking about this. Anyone from Anthony Robbins to,
I think it's funny that he called him Anthony Robbins.
All of them. They all start parroting each other, and it's the reticular activating system. It's part of the mind. It's responsible for focus, awareness, consciousness, arousal, all things that are very important for your mind to be interested. And if you're not interested in something and your mind is just like half-ass about it, it's not going to get done as well as it can be. So now the information that this guy had told me was, okay, reticular activating system is responsible for, all these sort of mind things, consciousness, arousal, awareness, peaking the mind, essentially, focus. And also it acts like a filter of information.
Spot on, because I also truly think it's all a layered thing here, and our brain is filtering through the layers of reality. For example, the one side, I can never remember his name. I think it's Donald. He makes a joke that you could be having like an elephant walk across your room, but you're just not able to perceive it. So it's because we don't have that filter turned on. And for me, it leads into, we don't have the neurons built in there. And I feel like if we were to build those neurons to see that, you would need to get into some really trippy exercises, in my opinion, and maybe potentially even introduce some use of psychedelics. But honestly, this could cross a line. I've seen people use way too much things like DMT and blow their mind out, and it's almost like you're opening that layer potentially, and then you're seeing too much and your brain is cracked and you're not ready for that. So you could be seeing people, you could be seeing all the geometric patterns, you could be just having a hallucinatory experience that is uncomfortable because you are the only one seeing it, because nobody else is filtered out to see. Their brain is not capable of rendering that version of reality that you're experiencing. And that's what I do truly believe is happening here. So when you are activating your reticular activating system, you are signaling it to search and find. what you want in this reality, and it will start to conform and see everything in that nature. That's why sometimes it's hard to do these different conspiracy videos, because the more you have primed your brain to convince you of something, it's very hard to unconvince somebody of something that they've wholly ingrained their brain into, because then their brain is firing on that frequency of whatever that thing is that they're constantly thinking is true, or that thing that they're always focusing on. Like, for example, I want to do a video on flat earth as well. But if you are wholly convinced that the earth is flat, or you are convinced that the earth is round, you will use whatever evidence is on each side to prove your case. And that specific evidence will have made your brain, especially if you do nothing but seek out things to train your algorithm to start showing you things over and over again. And then we do have things called mirror neurons, and they will start mirroring over and over and over again this information. And then you will not actually be able to see the earth any other way. You'll be convinced that it is round, you will be convinced it is flat, etc., no matter what the evidence. And even if somebody shows you evidence, if your brain is too hardwired and you're not willing to accept any other proofs of anything else, your brain will see it as a falsity, or it will see it as a corrupt thing, or a malfunctioning program, or it's something that you need to ignore, or it's that it's not tagged as important because the reticular activating system sees these other things disproving that thing, and you keep firing off these mirror neurons, and then you actually can't experience or see that reality any other way, because you've just unprogrammed yourself, and your brain is just like, that's not a possibility. So you just cross out the idea in its entirety, and no matter what evidence you are shown, it does not appear to be solidifying to the side that you believe is the false side. So I hope I explained that well. So if you're trying to do a specific skill, if you are trying to focus on that skill and you do nothing but try to learn that skill, eventually you will master it, obviously. And if you train your reticular activating system in a certain way, especially if you do it at night and during these liminal states, you will like 2 or 3 times X your learning state. And this is what wraps into this neurogenesis and why we're talking about all this. How do we pump our brain up? How do we get to the next level? How do we see the sim how we want to see it? Like for me, for example, I don't want to talk about it too much, but I've been trading recently and I've been having a pretty good time with it. And recently, here's a way that I can show you. I feel like the sim is always shifting for me, because, and I'm not saying that it makes it easy. It's like a game that I'm constantly having to mess with and play with, but have a lot of fun and be very childlike in nature, where I'm very curious and just going into the unknown all the time and trying to have fun. Obviously, have some sort of risk aversion because I don't want to be crazy and do things that are not, good or beneficial, especially for my financial wellness. I'm not going to go out and gamble or blow all of my money trading or anything like that. Train your brain to see the patterns in the market. If you listen to subliminals, if I can listen to things on certain brainwave frequencies, I will super train my reticular activating system, and I may be able to start trading better and better, more efficiently and more efficiently. I feel like I've been doing pretty well so far. I'm not claiming that I've done these huge mega trades or anything like that, but I'm on the path to learn, and I'm not going to stop, and I'm going to continue to play with these different ideas, because I think the weirder you can get, the more novelty is another thing you'll hear people talking about as well. The more novel, and novelty is open to interpretation. It's like, what is new for your brain? What have you never seen before? So if I come across a video that has all these different funky frequencies and beats, and I might have some sort of affirmation or affirmation, which you'll hear about later as well in there. it might hit my brain in a certain way. And if I ask certain questions during that hypnagogic liminal state, I can get answers from my subconscious. So let's let him continue to talk.
So it's in the brainstem. It's one of the first parts of the brain we developed. So midbrain, which is this is a part of the reticular activating system. Midbrain, cortex, neocortex. And the more layers, so we have 7 layers of neocortex. And I thought, wow, that's a trip. That's a motor component, muscle component. Now, the information that this guy had told me was, okay, reticular activating system is responsible for, all these sort of mind things, consciousness, arousal, awareness, peaking the mind, essentially, focus. I have an infinite amount of neocortex. But anyway, so essentially, the more layers of brain that we develop, the higher consciousness we have. Like neocortex allows us to do higher process thinking, future planning, arithmetic, this kind of thing. So higher process thinking is involved in neocortex. But going back to the reticular activating system, it's one of the first parts of the brain developed, so it's really, really, really important. Now, what he told me that was advanced and is still cutting edge, and you had never heard about this, and that is this, that the reticular activating system is also responsible for not only those mind things that I mentioned, again, focus, awareness, arousal, consciousness, and the filtering of information. Let's go back to that. Essentially, how it works is, if you're looking for your keys, your mind starts to look for the pattern of keys. So the shape of keys, so you find it. It's like you're focusing on keys, and that's what happens. Your mind focuses on that. There's a hierarchy as to the information that's coming in. It judges the importance of what's going on around. So if you all of a sudden are in danger, like a tiger appears or an earthquake happens or whatever, essentially, instead of whatever you were doing at the time, you abruptly realize that you need to focus on, survival. And so it's super important that, you know what's important to focus on at the time. The reticular activating system will essentially, if you were writing something down, it realizes, stop that, let's get into a safe, location or whatever's needed. Things. What he told me, which is still cutting edge today, and like I said, you've never heard about this unless you heard it from me already, responsible for, reticular activating system is also responsible for. You're firing off your extensor muscles, so anti-gravity muscles. And I thought, wow, that's a trip. That's a motor component, muscle component. And, I realized, all these things are mind. And then all of a sudden you get the anti-gravity muscles. And so I had known all this when I was talking universe, energy, instrument, so on and so forth. And the way he explained
I find that extremely interesting, the whole idea of mixing anti-gravity with this.
how the mind and the extensor muscles work is, when you're a baby or a fetus, you're hunched over. And as you grow up, you fire off your extensors, your posture is more erect, and you stand, straight up. And as you age and your mind declines, you start to hunch over again. So immediately, I reverse engineered in my mind. I was like, well, that's interesting. I'm wondering if you fire off your extensor muscles doing exercises, which, like I said, I was divining this information. So I incorporated these exercises into when I was trying to connect with source. When I was trying to get information from the universe, I was looking to connect with source itself. And so going back to the conversation in the universe, first question, what am I? Energy, instrument, pick different energy forms around you. And I realized the more accurate your information is intake, the more accurate your reaction to reality will be. And you want to be symbiotic, congruent, in tune with the universe. It's all frequency. When I say in tune, it's a frequency that you want to acquire, or a state of being, a vibration that you want to express. And so even though the answer of I'm an energy instrument came to me, I thought I want it to be even more basic and deeper. Yeah, that was a simple answer that I got from the universe, but I wanted it to be even simpler. There's a quote, I don't know who it is that said it, but essentially, I think it was Einstein that said this: the simpler you can explain something, the closer you are to truth. And the answer this time came to me, and it was through physics that, I understood this, studying physics. And that was, well, all we are is mass. And there's an integral property to mass, possibly for all time space, as far as we know, and that is that mass has a property called gravity. So a little speck of sand has, as small as it is, it has a gravitational pull. And I had a teacher that explained this concept quite interestingly, and that was, if there was like an edge to the universe, and you could put one grain of sand on that edge of the universe and go the furthest away you could on the other side, and put another grain of sand on that opposite end of the universe, if that were possible, there would still be a gravitational pull effect on each other. And I thought, well, that's kind of mind-blowing. And so, like I said, the right information came to me. And so the Earth, for example, the more mass you have, the greater the gravitational pull. There's the sun that has a pull on the solar system, all the planets. There's the moon, which the Earth can hold. And Earth is basically, obviously bigger than the moon because the moon rotates around the Earth. And let me differentiate between gravity and weight. Or mass and weight. So if you go to the moon, you're going to weigh less because there's less of a gravitational pull on your body towards the surface of the planet. And let's say if you weigh, 185 here on Earth, you go to the moon, because there's less of a gravitational pull, you're going to weigh less over there. But you're made up of the same amount of stuff, whether you're on Earth, mass, that stuff, or the moon. So anyways, when it came to me that, gravity, mass, and this is when I say it's an integral part of us, I mean, on a super fundamental level, we have had a relationship to gravity for all of time space. So everything that this energy instrument is processed information while experiencing gravity. Now, gravity is such a fundamental.
So the avatar does process gravity obviously all day long. It's what's connecting us down into the earth. But if you do believe in the whole thing that this is a holographic projection, then it would be just whole electromagnetism pulling this whole thing together at the end of the day. But for all intents and purposes, for like 3D purposes of living in the simulation, which is the universe environment, I do tend to believe that it is gravity holding us down and not letting us float away.
Force that you don't normally think about it. For example, when you're sitting, and just doing your thing, you don't think about your position of your arms or legs, whatever. You normally just put yourself in the most comfortable position automatically. It's an automatic response. Um, so that's how fundamental it is. Now, I'm going to give you some information ahead of time, and I'll explain it linearly later. But the more you play with gravity through movement, it's a relationship with the universe. Well, what it does, the more you move, essentially, is you're sending extra information through your reticular activating system, which filters the data. But what you're doing is, you're through movement, you are and playing with gravity is what I call movement. Okay, you have to have fun with this. It's an interesting relationship that you
I
create with
love
the
that.
universe. And so, um, so basically, when you're moving, what you're doing is you're making your body into a generator. Now, how a generator
Spin around while you do your affirmations. No, I mean, I wonder if this would work if you spun real fast while you were asking yourself questions or and I even do this like jumping on my trampoline while listening to an insightful podcast that's making me think.
works is usually there's a coil and a magnet, and the magnet spins, and it creates an electron flow through the coil, or usually sometimes it's copper. And what happens is the movement of magnetism, essentially, and it moves this way. So this is something I remember learning. If it's going this way and the coil is going this way, when the magnet's moving in a circle, what it does is it generates electron movement in this direction, or this direction if it's spinning this way, or
Okay.
that direction if it's spinning this way. But the point is, movement's involved. It creates electric current. Me being the ever questioner, and I think really I was rewarded all of this information because I really had a passionate desire that was earnest. There's no substitution for really wanting something when it comes to manifesting or receiving information, et cetera, et cetera. So that's important to know. In order to really manifest what you want, you have to, number one, become focused and movement. What ends up happening is you're generating all of this extra information in your body, which is electricity. It goes through your reticular activating system. Essentially, it's like a dimmer switch. So you turn up the dimmer switch, the light gets brighter. And essentially, when you're sending more information from your position in time space through movement, your relationship with gravity, what you're doing is you're amping up your brain. You're generating more power. It's actual power. If you study physics, you can understand how electricity, power works. And so you're essentially supersaturating your brain with all this information, actual power. So what's happening is your brain works like a radio station antenna. What's important for a radio station antenna? Frequency that it broadcasts, and that is everything has frequency. I mean, everything has a frequency. Beauty has a frequency. Information has a frequency. Love has a frequency. And so knowing how to tune your brain to frequencies that's one thing. You have to be able to envision, but also you need power. In other words, there's certain radio stations that broadcast on more power, and what that does is you're able to pick up that radio station at a further distance. So the more power you generate for your brain, the more malleable the universe becomes. So not only do you need the right frequency, which is the thought, you need to also generate power, literal, for your brain, and focus is the most important aspect to that.
So if you heard me said the thought and then the energy, to generate the energy to the brain, and then have the action to go with it.
That allows you to tap into higher power, the right frequency, and to stay tuned. All of those are important. So
He's somebody that's very much so an advocate of working out, and I'm probably going to end this with him right here and just give a little update on the summarization of his video. Okay, so he's somebody that believes that the three doors to the source, a lot of energy work, in my opinion. And he's talking about like physical work, engaging in intense primal exercise to lower cortisol, generate electricity in the body, and amp up the brain. He's talking about working your ass off. I mean, and I'm not, do what you do to stay safe, but I do like this perspective to they say you should get your heart pumping like really good multiple times a week, that is good for your brain. So that goes along with that whole thing that there is scientific researches for this. So I'm not shocked that he uses this practice or whatever. So it's almost like, so for me right now, the way I would use it, and there's plenty of ways you can use this, like this is just an example for me. I'm sure if you left a comment or something, we could figure out how you would use it for yours. But I wanted to learn how to trade. And it's not like I can just do a Neville Goddard stats, sleep in the wish fulfilled, and then suddenly the next morning I'm up and trading. That's not how it worked. It was micro actions over and over again, and also doing these things alongside with it that gave me intuition, that gave me push and motivation to keep doing it, even when it was something that was not normal for me. So I'm slowly becoming better and better at it. And then the more and more I practice and use these weird, novel ways to train the brain, I'm being able to see the patterns. And it's only becoming easier and easier for me. And at some point, I will surpass it to where it will become a second nature. So, this is where I am trying to create that neurogenesis in that area to learn this skill that would generate income for me no matter what type of situation I was in, because it depends on the markets. So, and here it says that neurogenesis is the idea that consistent practice creates new neural highways, allowing the brain to move beyond past limitations and manifest desired results. The presenter highlights that this process is powerful and cautions that one should aim for good energy traits like love, beauty, and moral integrity when channeling these states, which I agree. I've said it before. I agree with the golden rule, treat others as you treat yourself. This is another gentleman, so shout out to that gentleman. This is another gentleman. His name is the Authentic Connector, but he is not this person. This person is Harrison Klein. He hosted him on his channel. He was another person, and he called it quantum neurogenesis. And I asked him to summarize the video.
And my inner experience was all that of a gigantic resistance. All I did was say no. Hey, clean this up. No. Do this. No. Go here. No. Everything about me shouted no to every single thing that there was. So that was my experience of life. Imagine having a steady state of well-being, finding positive energy everywhere in life. Imagine solving the brain puzzles that you've had before. Imagine how to quickly respond and resolve trauma, which is what many of us go through continuously, and especially in the growing process. So imagine nearly always being cheerful and funny and brilliant and on purpose.
So this gentleman, I'm going to just sum it up because I don't want to take too much time here on him. This gentleman explains that the world is composed of subatomic energy and intelligence, and by focusing one's attention, one can manifest desired life experiences. Neurogenesis is the process focuses on creating new neural pathways that harmonize the brain's hemispheres, moving away from reactive and emotional states to a higher 30,000-foot perspective of life, which that's amazing. And then there's the I am principle, the core belief that the system that is what we get in life, what we are, not what we want. Therefore, one must first identify with their desired reality internally to manifest, and shattering old limiting beliefs. So he was just another person that I saw speaking on this, which is interesting as well. And the other person that I wanted to talk about was this Mark Hyman. He has a decent amount of followers. He's got a million in the science of neurogenesis and psilocybin. And I asked them to summarize the video as well. So the key takeaways were that fungi is the Earth's internet, which this is so cool to me. I've kind of talked about this before. I was like, was the everything originally a big fungi? Our brain is like a big fungus. Stamets explains that the mycelium, I don't know if I'm saying that right, is an ancient interconnected network that serves the planet natural internet. He highlights that the soil health and plant communication depends on this network, which is often severely down to conventional tilling practices. Yeah, so plants can communicate to one another. The fact that we can use medicinal mushrooms, the fact that psilocybin can help neurogenesis, because it binds to the 5-HT2A receptors in the brain and stimulates the release of the brain derived neurotropic factor. via the TRKB receptor. So it sounds like Miracle-Gro for the brain. But we need to be careful with that because remember, I feel like if you do things of this nature too much, you could be opening too much of reality's filter, and we're not supposed to be doing that. I don't feel, not yet, or like we haven't built the synapses for that yet to not go crazy, to not be put in an insane asylum, because there is situations where people take too much of this stuff and do kind of get cracked. Just wanted to bring that up because that is another large thing here that just for me proves that you can start growing new synapses. And I wanted to show like what this looks like.
What you're looking at here are two neurons under the microscope that I've filmed. And if you wait really patiently, you'll be able to see them connecting to one another.
This is pretty cool. This is what I'm talking about. I feel like when you're doing the weird stuff, when you're doing the things in the hypnagogic state, when you're doing that, this is when you're sleeping. And here would be when you're making those new connections. So then when you wake up the next day, that task or activity would be like way easier to execute or do or deal, whatever it is that you're trying to experience. It doesn't matter. It'll get strengthened more and more, and then these pathways will continue to communicate to one another, and you will have that action start to form subconsciously, and you will start to act in the way that you are trying to program yourself. And obviously there's conscious and subconscious effort. And I did want to talk about the whole your brain is hallucinating this, because that is a major component to this. That's why we can retrain the brain, so to speak. And Neil Seth talks about this, is the brain is a prediction engine. So rather than passively receiving sensory data, the brain is locked in a skull, actively guessing the causes of its sensory input based on prior beliefs. So we have all these different ways to perceive reality: our sight, our taste, our smell, our touch, etc., etc. Some people believe we have lots more different sensory inputs that we don't really talk about or explore. Reality is a controlled hallucination. Seth proposes that when we agree on these shared hallucinations, we define them as reality. If our predictions are too strong and unchecked by sensory input, it can lead to actual hallucinations or psychedelic experiences. And I don't know if you guys ever heard of the rubber hand illusion. He brings that up. It demonstrates that like when they were hitting hammer and the guy's hand wasn't really there, he still reacted. So it shows that it's this experience that even though the brain sees that something's not there, it can be tricked into thinking that it is. So interception and survival, a critical, often overlooked aspect of consciousness is its interception, the brain's perception of the body's internal state. Seth argues that consciousness is fundamentally about control and regulation to keep a living organism alive rather than just intelligence. I believe that's a component of it, because in the game, you don't want to immediately die or throw yourself off the side of a building or something. So it's something that's innately built inside of us, especially too with all of the different things in the game that could potentially get to us, so to speak. So we're given that fear to be able to maneuver, but it has been turned into like this whole crazy manipulative thing, because it was built for a lot of different things, like running away from a lion or something like this. It has morphed into lies and deceptions and governments. So it's just been an interesting trajectory that we've been on. So, understanding consciousness as a predictive process offers new ways to treat conditions like depression and schizophrenia by addressing the underlying mechanisms of prediction. That suggests that consciousness is tied to our biological nature as living beings. Consequently, he remains skeptical that merely increasing the computational power of computers will result in sentient AI. This is just another thing here that feels like it proves that we're in a simulation. And here's a little bit of Andrew Huberman. I know he can be quite controversial, but I did like what he had to say here.
Researching it, both developmental neuroplasticity as well as more mature neuroplasticity. And I'll just briefly educate you on the different types of neuroplasticity. And this is by no means exhaustive, but it's worth knowing that there's maladaptive plasticity, the sort that happens after a traumatic experience or a brain injury. There's also adaptive plasticity, the sort that occurs when you learn some skill that you wanted to learn or you have a great experience. There's developmental plasticity, where the brain is being modified more or less through passive experience, either maladaptively or adaptively. And there is what's called self-directed adaptive plasticity, which is the sort of plasticity that most people are thinking about and talking about when you hear about it in the news, on social media, and in the context of health and wellness. Now, self-directed adaptive plasticity has a lot of different mechanistic types, right?
And that's what we're talking about here is that self-directed kind mostly.
There's long-term potentiation, there's long-term depression, which basically has nothing to do with emotional depression, nonetheless that's the term. There's time-dependent plasticity and on and on. Those are all different ways that the synapses, the circuits modify themselves. But self-directed adaptive plasticity is the one to really keep in mind if you're thinking about how to either build in new cognitive, emotional, and physical skills, or all of the above, and or if you're trying to unlearn unhelpful or unhealthy or unwanted cognitive, emotional, or physical attributes, okay? So self-directed adaptive plasticity can actually be accessed through a number of different ways, but the key principles here are that you need to be alert and you need to be focused when you are triggering the plasticity. The plasticity is triggered. You can't be passively listening to something. You need to be paying close attention, and you'll be encouraged, I hope, to know that the friction, the confusion that you feel, that's actually the trigger for plasticity. It involves the release of specific so-called catecholamines, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, most typically epinephrine, and
Yeah, so I just created a binaural beat for myself for when I trade. So so like today I actively was trading while I was listening to different binaural beats, and I'm going to continue to do that to experiment with that as well.
norepinephrine, it is associated with a bit of mild anxiety often that can further heighten focus, okay? The actual rewiring of circuits, the modification of brain circuitry and body circuitry that we call neuroplasticity, that occurs typically in deep sleep, both deep sleep, but I should also say in REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. Now, it depends on the sort of plasticity, which one predominates, but you need both of those. But I think many people will be encouraged to know that the rewiring occurs during sleep. This is why you can try a new physical skill. You can't do it, come back a couple days later after a good night's sleep or two, and boom, you have some aspect or all of the skill dialed into your nervous system. Amazing, right? Amazing, and yet, based on what we know, not surprising that there was a delay because the actual rewiring occurs during sleep. Now, here's what's new. Wake up as if a gong went off, or typically it's an alarm clock. Some of you perhaps wake up more slowly, what we call sleep inertia. There are a variety of factors that dictate that. But the first minutes after waking, if you keep your eyes closed and you pay attention to what
It's so crazy because this morning when I was waking up, I wrote down in ChatGPT, why does it feel like I'm booting up? Like sometimes when I wake up, I'm like, yo, my brain needs a moment.
your spontaneous thought patterns are in those first minutes after waking, you'll notice whether or not you quickly go to anxiety or you'll quickly go to disorganized thinking, this sort of thing. That liminal state between being asleep and being awake turns out to be a very unique state for rewiring your brain. And this is not based on speculative science. It turns out that states of deep rest, as well as these liminal states between asleep and awake, are unique opportunities to self-direct some adaptive plasticity. So what sorts of things could you do? Here's what I suggest, because you're all dealing with different things. You all like to unlearn and learn different things, perhaps.
I like to do mine before I fall asleep. Don't get me wrong. You can do it when when you're first waking up. But usually I'm so freaking disoriented if I've been sleeping for a long time. I can do this off and on with naps, like waking up and falling asleep. It's best using naps. Naps during the day are fun. And then honestly, you can kind of like train yourself to go into these states in your waking state. You just have to play with it enough again and create the neural pathways. And I also believe that talking to yourself, and he'll say it too, asking yourself questions will start to create these pathways as well.
Exit sleep and awaken, that you just pose a couple of questions about ways that you might be able to think or behave differently in your day, not just that day, but every day. Okay, I know this sounds a little bit woo, it sounds a little bit loose, but it's actually very closely tied to a lot of the really beautiful peer-reviewed clinical and laboratory science that's been done by my colleague, Dr. David Spiegel at Stanford School of Medicine, who works specifically on hypnosis. But hypnosis is just one of many sort of liminal or atypical states where you can improve or accelerate plasticity. So tomorrow morning when you wake up, or if not that morning, the next morning and the next, or perhaps every morning, just give yourself a minute or two. It doesn't.
It's because your brain is a predictive mechanism. Your brain wants to predict what's going to happen next in the way that you would like it to happen when you are with intention giving these questions like, why do I make so many wonderful trades every day? And your brain will start to focus in on all the reasons that I am making so many wonderful trades. My reticular activating system will focus in on this. And then with enough repetition, I will continue to make the micro actions and then take larger actions to make wonderful trades. And it will feel like second nature. And I will not say like it feels like hard work. It will be as if it just started to flow naturally. You go into your flow state. So it's all about the way you train your mind.
take long, or even just 30 seconds. And as you're emerging from sleep, reclose your eyes and just pose a question. For instance, I wonder if today, when stress hits, whether or not I could organize my thoughts around the best way to approach that stress. Or I wonder if today, as the inevitable incoming news about the state of the world feels overwhelming, that I'm able to compartmentalize in a way that's healthy for me and allows me to show up better for myself and other people. I know this sounds very, very psychological.
They were a lot of very specific questions. I usually don't go that specific, but I get what he's saying. You could totally do this with anything. Like, why did I have such a great day at work today? Why does everybody that I know treat me with such wonderful respect? It just depends on why do I always have such wonderful, great, loving relationship. It depends on what you're looking to experience. You repeat that to yourself.
Very woo, very new agey, but it's grounded in excellent neuroimaging data, clinical data, which you can hear about on the podcast tomorrow, and just dozens and dozens of beautiful experiments that have shown that these liminal states between sleep and awake offer us a unique opportunity to both ask questions that help us unlearn unhealthy thought patterns, behavioral patterns, and also rescript them. And so if you want to take the next step and start to rescript
And at this point, there's been a lot of scientists and people that have come forth and admitted that they've used this state to be able to finish inventions, et cetera, et cetera. Like, for example, I have been using this Muse band to measure my brainwave states while I trade. So this is a very interesting concept for me. And if I measure my brain's states during the hypnagogic state or during certain liminal states, it's like, do they match up? What sort of information may I be perceiving during those brainwave states? And we're going to move into that in a minute with the Monroe Institute.
You deem to be unwanted thought patterns or behavioral patterns, feel free to do that in those first couple minutes upon waking. The data suggests this is a unique and powerful opportunity to do that. It certainly doesn't negate doing that at other times of day or whatever through therapy or your it is. I mean, it really is this an unbelievable property that we human beings have been endowed with to self-direct adaptive plasticity.
The thing I want to talk to you about is Robert Monroe and the fact that these frequencies paired along with your focus. So you could be doing this during the liminal stage, or you could be using these types of frequencies during active stages. It depends on the frequency that you use, and also using the binaural beats, because your brain starts to entrain, and then I believe it starts to what seems like entrain with certain frequencies, certain like maybe vibrational frequencies like the Schumann frequency of the earth, etc., etc. And then you were able to tap into different things, get different information, be able to hear different things, get intuitions, be able to, according to many people, they get out of body experiences. This happens for me too. I can see vivid imagery in the hypnagogic state. You can get answers during this time, and this will basically amplify that, in my opinion. You do not need any of this to technically reality shift or do things in the simulation. You can walk around like again, we talked about this earlier, walk around like a normal human being, quote unquote, never wear any of this stuff. And you're so good at priming your reticular activating system that you just get to experience the life that you want to live. And then, you go on and, you're just happy about the life you live and you don't think about any of this stuff. People do that all the time. This is for those of us that perhaps want to learn something new that they've never learned before and want to do it in new, novel ways and discover how to fast track yourself. And this is not negating work. This is not telling you don't work for anything. It's like a happy medium. It's don't break your ass, but here's these tips and tricks to be able to trick your subconscious so these things become easier and easier for you, and you can micro move and not feel like it's this overwhelming thing. And then it's the snowball effect, if you will. And between these different things that you're enacting, you are growing your neural pathways, you are shifting the sim, and then you are then going to experience the thing that you want to experience. We can use this in any modality in life. I do believe even with things like the lottery, even with things like different career paths, finding love, etc., etc. Am I somebody that believes that you can just be, a lot of the people in the community that like to claim that this stuff isn't true. It's usually like if you can't get a celebrity crush or whatever, like then manifestation is not real. But I'm kind of the person that believes in we came here to have experience. And when we seek out these superficial experiences, and I'm not claiming that anybody's superficial or your experience is superficial, but if you're just wanting to experience something for very ego driven purposes, you could potentially get it, but does everybody always get it? No. I believe we live in a world of potentialities, and you can collapse those probabilities and potentialities for yourself. But it's not like you'll just wake up and get whatever you want whenever you want. Like, oh, you want to date Britney Spears. It doesn't mean that tomorrow morning you do an affirmation tonight to grow your brain cells and then suddenly you're dating Britney Spears or something like that. Maybe in another universe you are, but if you aren't a certain reality and that is not a thing for you because she's not even in a position to be doing anything of this nature, that may not be a reality for you. I'm just throwing out like a crazy, silly example, but it's not like something where we want to go with these crazy, grandiose things all the time. I believe that you do have to dream big, but I think that it's within what you really came here to do in the sim and have and live your best life and not let it be impending or not let it be falling upon the hands of somebody else to make you happy, or that you have to have some external thing here to make you happy. That's ultimately what I'm trying to get at. That it's not like anything out here in the sim should be why you want to procure something just to have it for fun. I'm not saying that that's not cool too, but it's just like an ego driven thing. Sometimes those things don't end up happening for us because of the probability of it. And you may experience it in another lifetime, but in this lifetime, I don't know. Because you always have a lucid dream or out of the body experience. Yeah, sure. But for the most part, I think that if you try to align yourself and do things that really are in what seems like the reason you came here to have this experience in a genuine fashion, and you raise your consciousness to be at a status to where you see what the bigger picture is here, and you're able to help those around you see the bigger picture if possible, not to force anything upon anybody, obviously, because this is something that everybody should do in their own time. But we didn't talk too much about physics, but everything is entangled with one another. And it's just realizing that. And the more that we believe that we can see something a certain way, we will start to make our neurons fire. Am I saying that this works for everybody every time? No. Could this be something that we have to continuously practice and grow as a human species? And then eventually, at some point, we will be able to master that and we will be able to do things like time travel or, I don't know, break certain barriers, discover anti-gravity things. Who knows? Is there aliens, people coming to visit us from other planets? Who knows? So it's just interesting to go down this avenue to explore certain concepts like neurogenesis, how we can make our brains this super highway to transfer us into the reality that we want to experience. So I hope everybody enjoyed, and I'm going to get out of here because it's getting late now. And until the next time, guys, may you all continue to manifest magic and resonate on your most aligned frequency. All right, bye, guys.